Assalamu alaikum sisters, and welcome to Step Up, the show for the 21st century Muslimah.
In this series, we are looking at issues that affect us as teenagers and how Islam is applicable to us, inshallah.
I'm Hafsa.
And I'm Ruqayya, and we have a jam-packed show for you today.
So what's on the show?
Well, we start off with Ask Big Sister, where Big Sister Hanan will be on the hot seat answering our questions about whether internet and social media really affect us. Does what we say have any effect on others? It's sure to be an interesting discussion, inshallah.
We then visit an organisation called ThinkuKnow that gives advice on how to stay safe on the internet. We'll be sure to learn some tips.
Then Aisha talks about one of my favourite Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Masud.
We then speak to Asma Sacranie, who is a designer and works for Modestly Active.
As well as our weekly competition, we have lots coming up in the next hour, so don't go anywhere.
Today on Ask Big Sister, we're discussing self-esteem. Joining me in this discussion, I have my sisters Sumaya.
Assalamu alaikum.
And Selma.
Assalamu alaikum.
Low self-esteem in young people is a very common and real experience today. Young people suffering from this are more at risk of developing depression, anxiety, and even self-harming. Dealing with the general ups and downs of life becomes that much harder when suffering from these issues. So, what causes low self-esteem, and what can we do to help? Joining us to answer these questions, we have with us our big sister Hanan. Walaikum salam. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm okay today.
Alhamdulillah. Sis, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Hanan. I am a master's student studying media in the Middle East.
Very cool.
So I obviously go to college, and when we go to college or university, what are the signs that you can detect of someone who has lower self-esteem?
I think first of all it's really important to distinguish between what self-esteem is and what confidence is, because I think a lot of people conflate these two, and it's quite detrimental to the person. You can have a lot of confidence, you can fake confidence, you can walk into a room and speak to a ton of people, but at the same time you can have low self-esteem, and low self-esteem essentially is how you see yourself and how you view yourself, and confidence is more to do with your achievements, so things that you could achieve. You could, for example, practice swimming and then achieve something great in that area, but then there could be another area that you're not so confident with. And so a lot of psychologists link this, actually, they call it something to do with the domain. So that's where it differs in terms of, you know, how you would see, it's how you see yourself and then how you're being projected out into the world around you. And so I think it's really important in terms of distinguishing these things. It's hard, actually, and a lot of people can hide it really well. I think it's to do with the negative thought process. So if people are constantly putting themselves down, if you're complimenting them, they're not believing it, or they're really heavily uncomfortable with compliments or things like that, these are really subtle telltale signs, but often it's really hard to tell, and so it's really important that people are just made more aware about aspects of self-esteem and confidence, and just education in that field,
Yeah, we're probably going to get onto this later, but what you mentioned about, people not accepting compliments,
Right.
like, because I was looking into this myself, and I was looking at ways, that you can increase your self-confidence, your self-esteem. And one of the things that was mentioned is to accept compliments gracefully, to say thank you.
I was actually reading something about, you're right, I was reading something about that, what psychologists say, that we're often very apologetic for the things that we have naturally, and even Islamically that's not right, Allah gave us the talents that we have, and the gifts that we have, whether it be in whatever arena, whether it be what we can do, whether we can run, whether we can fix a mathematical equation, whether we, alhamdulillah, we have all of our limbs working, things like that. But at the same time, psychologists also talk about how it's actually nice for the person who's complimented you to then hear a thank you. Like, it's very gratifying for them as well. So it's a nice balance, of just social interaction, and that comes back to Islam and adab and manners, and saying thank you when somebody's being kind to you. So there's actually a lot of wisdom behind that as well.
And also, I think maybe it comes from feeling undeserving as well. Like maybe if someone says compliment to you, you might think no, but that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go, then you proceed to kind of reject it, and again, you don't realise the effects that it has on the other person and yourself, and it's altogether detrimental.
And I mean, I often I don't blame anyone who does feel that way, because we're just living in a society where everything is focused upon what we look like, you know, and people feel like they fall short of that. Like there's some things that you physically can't change about yourself, and so, you know, for example, if you don't know a language, you can learn a language and then you'll feel great. But you know, there are some things that you physically can't change, and there are people in the world, and there is like a societal norm of what is considered beautiful or what is considered, you know, and all these things for a young person is really hard to come to terms with. And you know, accepting who you are, that's a very difficult thing to do, especially in the society we're living in. There was a statistic that mentioned that actually girls are more likely to feel bad about their physical image than boys are, but the percentage has risen since last year. It was 29%, this year it's 33%, and it just keeps rising, right? So yeah, and I think it is to do with, you know, we've discussed before, it is to do with social media and things that, images that are put out there for young people.
And I think especially due to living in this society, and there's loads of fashion and makeup trends, like there's all these things based around girls, like this is what's beautiful, this is what's ugly, like you kind of have to follow this or people won't like you, and there isn't that much with boys. But also, especially with us as Muslims, it's harder for us to do that if we wear the hijab. So many Muslims can face low self-esteem. So what advice would you give them, or how could you help them?
Well, there's so many things that you picked up there. Like, you've actually picked up many massive topics. One being that actually, although I did say that women suffer more than men in this, there is still that growing culture of some males being really pressurized, having to look a certain way and be a certain way, especially in relation to self-esteem, because a lot of them it's seen as it kind of almost effeminate if they cry, for example, but how else are we supposed to exert emotion, you know? So there's that one thing, but there's also elements as well of dealing with, you know, this whole culture of, you know, looking fashionable and this kind of thing. Now, if we go back to what Islam tells us, there is this we have like a firm structure to hold on to, and often with fashion, it's constantly changing. So we'll never keep up with it, essentially. That's how capitalism works. It's constantly giving you a desire to have something that you don't have. That's how it keeps going.
Basically feeding off of your insecurities.
So you will never feel contented, because you'll always want the next thing. And again, as we're saying, images put out there, oh, that looks really nice, I want that. And obviously sometimes we can't get that. So there's that element of things. So it's very much, when we go back to Islam, it's this thing of not being enslaved by anything. You know, whatever that might be. You know, we might be really obsessed with video games, or we might be obsessed with, I know a few kids that I taught once, they were obsessed with gaming and all these, and that they actually developed other bad habits from that. So, you know, it's going back to, okay, who am I a slave? I'm a slave of Allah, first and foremost. And then when you think about all these other things that can become really, they can have massive effects on people. I've seen people who, they want to have surgery and change what they look like, and all these really sad realities, because, you know, what are they looking at day after day? And that really comes back to, who are our role models? You know, when we look at, when we open social media, we see all these girls that look amazing, they're living this life, or, you know, and these are the role models. But I think that comes back to, you know, what happened to female scholarship, for example? What happened to all these really strong, intelligent women? Why aren't they being propagated and you know, put to the forefront, you know? Absolutely. Popular culture doesn't encourage that. They want to keep us dumbed down and looking pretty and, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I think when it comes, because you mentioned hijab, didn't you? I think when it comes to hijab, it's so important to kind of broaden the conversation about hijab. Like, we can't narrow the purpose, even though modesty is very important. We can't say that's the be-all and end-all, because that's actually very contradictory, because what we're saying is that your looks are the most important thing, so cover it up, therefore you can be, you know.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And that's what the point I was making as well, is this idea that if we constantly focus on something, we'll become obsessed with that thing. It's just natural, right? So if we are constantly given like something else, like a distraction in this field, then we can see that, okay, perhaps let me work on my mind, perhaps let me work on my personality, perhaps let me work on my adab, my manners, let me work on this. And I think that's what the problem, day after day, we're constantly said, oh, this makeup tutorial, oh, this is what you can do with this, or this hijab tutorial, or, you know, this style, or, and obviously if that's all you're seeing, that's all you're going to focus on. But when you are open to another world, that there's so much more out there to discuss and think about, and you know, that young people, I don't feel like they're given that opportunity to really expand their minds and, you know, to go beyond what's just the physicality and that kind of thing.
I mean, as the young people, I think this idea of beauty is very shallow, in the sense that we don't really remind ourselves that beauty is something which will fade with time. As we grow, our beauty will also fade. And we need to kind of come back to the fact that, you know, although our beauty will fade, our character, if it's good, then it will stay with us for the rest of our lives. And that's something we need to remind ourselves of. And I mean, you know, there's a lot of people out there who perhaps don't have very high self-esteem. How or what tips would you give them to help them with their self-esteem, or perhaps help others who have low self-esteem?
That's a really good question. I think I would say first and foremost is majority of it will come from the mind, right? So it comes from ourselves. So the best thing that we can do, it's so much easier to be negative. It's so much easier to listen to shaitan. It's so much easier to think badly of ourselves and other people. But if we even just look at, you know, just the small fact of making 70 excuses for someone when you see something, why can't we do the same for ourselves? Why can't we be forgiving for ourselves? And so I'd say, like, actively enforcing positive affirmations constantly, saying them out loud. Often psychologists say when you're putting something out into the world, it's that there's something that, you know, it makes it more real for you, and it's something that you're working towards, and so it's something it becomes tangible. So if you're constantly drumming something into your mind day in, day out, that will become your reality. It will, you know. It's just like how all these negative thoughts have also become your reality. So I think that's one of the biggest things, being kind to ourselves and thinking well, thinking good thoughts, and taking care of ourselves, self-care.
Actually, just going off of that, you know, it's my sister's very obsessed with these kind of things. So we split like self-care and taking care of yourself. So I mean, we were talking about it, and we actually found, because she was preparing for a halaqah that she was going to give, and we actually found so many Islamic sources on taking care of yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally, and, you know, going back to what we were speaking about hijab, how it's broader than, you know, just modesty. It's, you know, about confidence. It's about instilling that confidence in yourself. But what are other things that, you know, Allah tells us, or the Prophet ﷺ tells us, to kind of boost our self-esteem and boost our confidence?
Well, first of all, I think it's how we view our religion in relation to ourselves. I think we should no longer have, we've been taught to, but we shouldn't have a chip on our shoulder about our religion. You know, we've been told the truth, and that this is what's true to us. And so when something's true to you, then you have that inner strength within you that, you know what, like this is my reality, and if you, that's in direct correlation with Allah, right? So by knowing our Creator, we're knowing more about ourselves. And so part of that is to know His attributes, to know His words, to know His names, and we understand more about the world in itself. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he said actually in this hadith narrated by Bukhari, he says that the parable of a believer is that of a fresh and moist plant. The wind tilts it this way and that way, and so is the believer. So you know, this is a great analogy for how we should be, essentially. So when we are hit with trials and tribulations, we should bounce back and not just kind of be like a firm stalk or a tree that might break completely. And so there's a lot of wisdom in you know, teachings like this, and just to accept what's happened to us, but to move forward and you know, be gracious and grateful, and you know, these are all actually have great ramifications for the mind, you know.
Absolutely. And I think going back to what you said about, you know, knowing Allah is in direct correlation with knowing yourself. And actually, you know, the opposite is true. But as the Quran very, you know, very bluntly says, that those who forget Allah causes them to forget their own selves, to get lost in it all, right? To get lost in yourself. And, you know, we've had conversations about social media and those kind of things, and I think that definitely plays in. But definitely with low self-esteem as well. Like, if you start discrediting yourself and forgetting all the good that's in you, then you've automatically forgotten yourself. You've forgotten kind of like...
Yeah, and it's essentially, it's like discrediting the gifts that Allah has given us. So you're venturing onto dangerous ground. But that's what it is. You know, we're taught to think like this, to put ourselves down. Especially British culture. I don't know what it is, but everyone's really apologetic for everything. And I think with American culture, for example, it's all about, you know what, let me be competitive and let me be the best at what I can be. And that's how we should be as Muslims. We shouldn't be constantly focusing on all the things that we can't do, but we should think about everything that we can do. We're given so much, the power of dua enough, and just all the teachings and of the most exemplary man, and the Quran, which is a perfect guide for anything that can go wrong. These are things to be confident about. These are things that we should be,
and also like you can find really comprehensive, guidance from these two sources, because I remember you mentioned to me about, with other people, how do you instill confidence or help people with low self-esteem? We have very clear examples of the Prophet ﷺ who would make an extra effort, to be inclusive, especially with those with low self-esteem. I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it was nice how he always gave people direct eye contact. Yeah. He wouldn't pull away from someone if they were shaking his hand. There was also a narration of when he was a little girl had held his hand and he didn't let go, and he held it throughout the city. Things like this, these are huge things. Do we implement these little but very powerful actions in our day-to-day thing? In day-to-day lives, it's beautiful, how we can implement that. And
I think it all comes back to our role models as well. Like, we have these role models, like celebrities, for example, and perhaps we're missing the point here. Like, we should really be having role models of the people in our own history, their own Islamic history. Like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example.
And also, there is a fantastic book by Sheikh Maududi, and he's basically giving a compilation of all the female scholars. And if you look at Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, he was taught by a woman. And this is not focused in the mainstream media. Of course, this is not focused upon. But also, it's not focused upon by ourselves. We're not doing our research, And even when we bring up our kids, having these women as our role models, Aisha, she compiled this many hadiths, and she was teaching them, and she was very quick-witted and smart. Images like that. This is what we can implement, and these are positive affirmations. And these make us feel good about our religion and what we are a part of, and not feel like we have to hide and be embarrassed of it, and why we wear the hijab, and pandering to any kind of other societal norms, that kind of thing. I think it's really important to also recognise that even though these people, like the female companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ himself, they're undoubtedly role models, but they're also human beings. These things, when we see that the confidence is an underlying message in the lives of the Sahabiyat, this didn't come out of, just nowhere, right? This came through faith. It came through learning, it came through growing, and I think we should afford ourselves that opportunity, and let ourselves fall and then get right back up. But Jazakallah khair, this is a really insightful discussion, alhamdulillah. If you are having any problems with any of the issues that we've mentioned in our discussion today, then please check out the information on the screens with organisations that can help. The expectations of society could be daunting to live up to, but the liberation that comes with developing a strong Islamic identity can be very fulfilling but difficult to reach. Islam aims to create a community of people who motivate each other in becoming the best we possibly can, achieving our potential, and dealing with the issues such as low self-esteem that may hinder our development. We're off to a break now, but do tweet us and let us know your thoughts on our discussion. That's @IslamChannel, #StepUp. We'll see you in 3. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Step Up, the show to enable the young Muslimah to step up in her deen.
The internet is such a huge part of our lives that it's impossible to imagine the world without it. But the virtual world has a darker side, and many young people are at risk, whether from cyberbullying, grooming, or interacting with strangers.
I am Khawla on a special report for Step Up, and today I'm at the offices of ThinkuKnow, which runs a campaign to raise awareness about staying safe online. Let's hear what they have to say.
ThinkuKnow is the education programme within the National Crime Agency CEOP Command. We are here for children and young people to give them as much information as possible about staying safe on and offline.
So what is your role at ThinkuKnow?
I'm a coordinator on the team, so I manage the education programme. We create resources for children and young people that are here within schools in the UK. We manage the websites that we have and we speak and train professionals in the field as well. Our website is ThinkuKnow.co.uk, and on that website children and young people find lots of information and advice on there, as well as films for them to watch to learn a little bit more about the topic.
So what are the dangers young people are exposed to online?
Online, there's definitely some risks associated. We do need to really remember there's lots of positives about being online as well. Some of the risks that we deal with here at the centre are around child exploitation and sexual abuse. There's many ways of raising awareness of online kind of safety. Obviously here, as a law enforcement agency, we have the programmes that we run through schools. We do know there's other ways and methods of delivering that message, and children, young people or adults or parents sometimes like to do that themselves. We would just like to make sure that's done in a safe way, so we would always encourage people to use more official resources if they're looking to get that safety message across. There's lots of ways of staying safe whilst using apps, whilst using games, whilst using social media. Really, really important, and the most important thing is that children and young people only speak to people or give out information to people that they know in the real world, so that's offline. Otherwise you do have no idea of knowing who they are. So if you're sharing any images, your location, any information that would make you known to somebody, then it's really important that you don't do that with people, as I said, that you don't know from the real world. We see cases every day here at CEOP where young people have been tricked or manipulated online, and we really want to make sure that everyone has enough information. So please do visit ThinkuKnow.co.uk to find out about the risks online and to find out how to keep yourself safe.
What should teenagers do if they know of somebody that's at risk of being abused online?
There's lots that children and young people can do. So they are the ones that are online, that are using these new apps and services, that are seeing what their friends are doing as well. So they are in a really, really positive position to be able to help them and support them if they need help. So really stay aware, stay alert of what's happening around them. If there's anything that they feel needs reporting, they can report that to an adult or to the site itself for removal. And if they need to seek support, especially on behalf of somebody else, is that they are in that position to do so, and they should really be standing up and supporting their friends online. They can maybe talk to their child's school and maybe run a session, maybe run a safety session for the younger years within that school, or run a parents and carers group as well to make sure that they're staying as up to date as possible. If they feel that there isn't anybody in their immediate circle to talk to, then to come directly to CEOP and to report that through our reporting button. The people that sit behind that are child protection experts. The young person, the child, would never be blamed for what's taken place. It's all non-judgmental, and we would deal with that report case by case. That young person would then be contacted in any way they would like by our child protection expert to see how they would like to continue with that report. So if you're watching this and you're a parent who's not necessarily online yourself, don't worry, there's lots that you can do. So as a parent, really talk to your child about the sites and apps that they're using. Involve yourself in those, so get them to talk you through what they do, who they're talking to. As a parent, you know your young person best. So if you notice any changes in behaviour, if they're spending more and more time online, if you feel they've maybe been upset by something that they've seen or become withdrawn, it's really important that you kind of step in and would safeguard your child as you would in any situation, be it on or offline. So to talk to somebody in your community who is in this kind of world of online safety, or come directly to us at CEOP and we'd be able to support. A number of ways in which you could communicate with CEOP or one of our trainers. Really important actually to go to your child's school and discuss any topics that you feel that you need discussing. We have trainers across the country, and they may be within your child's school who are trained directly by CEOP as well. You can use our reporting form as a parent as well, so feel free to use that to make contact with us. If you feel that for whatever reason that you wouldn't fill out that online form, then maybe ask a friend or another family member to help you do that. Parents play a really key and vital role in the protection of their children on and offline. We have a parents website at thinkuknow.co.uk/parents. We are currently in the process of having that website translated and be ready by the end of the year into Urdu, Gujarati, Punjabi and Bengali. So please do visit the website, take a look. It's also really key to find information out from your child's school. So to make it really accessible, please visit someone within your child's school who will be able to talk you through that information and offer any additional support you may need.
The internet is more than just useful, it's become an important part of our lives. But for all its benefits, we have to recognise the dangers it can present to young people. We have to be aware and never hide our activity online from those closest to us. So the two things I've learned today is number one, always make sure you know who you're speaking to. And number two, never agree to meet a stranger you met on the internet. Let's all take heed from this and stay safe, inshallah. See you back in 3. Assalamu alaikum.
It is rare indeed to find any book on the companions of Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him, that does not include the 6th person to convert to Islam, Abdullah ibn Masud. Despite being only 16 at the time, Abdullah grew to be one of the closest companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and left an undeniable legacy. Abdullah ibn Masud was of the tribe of Banu Hazail. When he was still a youth, he used to roam the mountain trails of Mecca far away from people, tending the flocks of sheep for a Quraysh leader. Eventually, Abdullah ibn Masud became a Muslim. Having been impressed with the Prophet and noticed how this man's character was nothing like what the Quraysh said about him, he offered to be in the service of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet agreed, and Abdullah ibn Masud gave up tending sheep to look after the needs of the Blessed Prophet. What an honor! Whilst Abdullah ibn Masud was looking after the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he adopted his manner and followed every trait until it was said of him, he was the closest to the Prophet in character. He also grew to be the best reciter of Quran and strove to remember every detail about the Book of Allah. The companions of the Prophet were together one day in Mecca. They were still few in number, weak and oppressed. They then said, "The Quraysh have not yet heard the Quran being recited openly and loudly. Who is the man who can recite it for them?" "I shall recite it for them," volunteered Abdullah ibn Masud. The companions turned to him and said, "We are afraid for you. We only want someone who has a clan who would protect them from their abuse." But Abdullah insisted. Abdullah stopped at the maqam and began to recite Surah Rahman. As the Quraysh realized that he was reciting the message that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had brought, they went up to him and began beating him as he continued reciting. When he went back to the companions, the blood was flowing from his face. "This is what we feared for you," they said. But Abdullah showed no fear as he replied, "By Allah, the enemies of Allah are not more comfortable than I am at this moment. If you wish, I shall go out tomorrow and do the same." Subhanallah, such an inspiration. This truly shows how age is not an obstacle in becoming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the strength to follow in Abdullah's footsteps. Ameen.
My name is Asma Sacranie and I'm an assistant designer for Modestly Active. I'm an assistant designer for Modestly Active, so essentially I'm designing alongside my mum in her company. And I'm also studying, so I study fashion buying and design at university. Some of the obstacles that I've faced in this industry are just the sort of things like having to do a placement year. You have to choose a company that you're going to be placed in, and the types of socializing events that they expect you to be a part of cannot always comply to a Muslim woman. My biggest inspiration so far has definitely been my mum. I know it sounds cliche, but she has definitely been my biggest inspiration. I was exposed to fashion and her company from a very young age, and it's all I've really seen growing up. So she has been my main role model. She's taken this brand and this concept to global heights, and it's definitely motivated me to do the same. There have definitely been many positive aspects of my journey. There have been lots of highs that I've experienced in this journey so far, some of which have been the amazing people that I've been exposed to, the amazing women that are doing similar things to me in the same boat, especially in the fashion industry, and who have been achieving great things, and meeting these people has definitely been one of the highs. Here I'm doing the initial sketch. When I get the first idea of a concept or for a product, I need to do the first sketch, which will give me an idea of what it is I want about components. So right now I'm drawing up an all-in-one swimsuit, just for a new range. I'm going to be thinking about where I want my components to sit, how I want it to fit, and then I can move on to creating my patterns for my first initial toile. The concept is usually derived from something that we need for the range. If we need a specific colourway or if we need a specific style, that will drive me to create a new design or a new sketch. From there, the process can take anywhere between 2 to 3 days to even 4 to 5 weeks, depending on how well the product is developing. I think the designing aspect is definitely the most fun part of the whole process, because that's where you can be the most creative without worrying about figures and fit and size. This is a part where you can really let loose and create something new, create something adventurous. And then when it comes to the garment technicians telling you exactly what you need and how you need to bring it back down to something that's more commercial, that's the part that can get a little bit more tricky. The work-study balance is definitely difficult. Trying to separate the two can be very hard, because what I'm doing in my work life definitely relates to what I'm studying. However, keeping that balance is really important so that I don't end up mixing up the two too much. However, everything I learn in my studying at the moment is very relatable to what I'm doing in my work life. So it does inspire me, and it does allow me to come up with new ideas and try to merge the two a little bit. To test the drape of the fabric, we're initially going to cut the fabric and then test it against the mannequin by pinning. So I'll begin by just taking some tailor's chalk, just marking out where I want the fabric to be cut, roughly. And then I will take my fabric shears and cut along. Now that I've cut the fabric, I can move on to the mannequin and pin. So here I'll just take some pins and place the fabric onto the mannequin. In the future, I think I would have liked to take Modestly Active to new global heights, developed the company from not just a swimwear and sportswear company, but also taken it further into fashion, into children's wear, taken it even into the menswear, and also have reached the goal of becoming a buyer and getting my qualification and taking that to new heights too. I think the biggest advice I can give to any teenager, any young Muslim woman who is looking to follow this career path in fashion, My biggest advice would be stay true to yourself, because anything that you want to accomplish, anything you want to do, and the guidelines that you've kept for yourself, you can do it within those guidelines. You can reach everything you want and still be who you are. It is a very difficult industry to get into, however, nothing is impossible. If you put your mind to it, you'll be able to reach whatever it is you are trying to aspire to be.
Well, that's it for this episode. Next week, we discuss the importance of being a youth and the responsibilities that we hold. We speak to Sister Sama and her online newspaper, The Typewriter. Find out what got her started. Find out more about new inspirational Sahabi. Catch us again, same time, same place next week. Make sure you let us know what you think by tweeting us at Islam Channel #StepUp.
Until then, salams from all the team.
Assalamu alaikum. Animal.
Do
what we say.
Do what we say have an effect on others? We have a say on the effects on others. It's a look at animal welfare.
Let's find out more.
Yes, I didn't say closer.
Let's go down. No, it was applicable. That was great.